Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alana Dillon. I'm an Education and Support Services Coordinator at Parkinson Society, BC. Welcome to our Care Partner series, Part 3, featuring our talk on caregiving stages, Learn Optimism, Discover Hope with clinical counselor Sky Lee. Before I formally introduce Sky, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items with you. First, I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar, so it will be posted on our website. Secondly, you will see a chat icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that icon to open it up, you can type your questions and comments in that chat box for Sky to answer. And then finally, to optimize your experience with this webinar, please ensure that you adjust your speaker volume both on your computer as well as on your actual speaker so that you can hear the webinar well. It's my pleasure to now introduce Sky Lee. Sky is a Vancouver-based registered social worker. She obtained her bachelor's and master's in social work from the University of British Columbia and has focused her career on helping families, adults, and seniors through major life transitions. Sky's specialty is providing intensive family support services. She has 13 years experience in case management, family support, seniors and caregiver care, and mental health and substance use. Sky has navigated some of the most complex family issues, including the trauma, grief, and loss that comes with a family member facing health, mental health, or addiction issues. Sky brings a relational and trauma-informed approach to her clients who are experiencing major life transitions, such as moving into care, facing a healthcare crisis, supporting aging parents, among other challenges. Sky, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this talk. I will pass it over to you now.
Hi, thank you, Alana, and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. So, as Alana said, my name is Sky, and just want to make sure everybody can hear me and see me. If not, please put something into the chat. I can't see the chat right now, but Alana can address that if there are any issues. So my name's Sky, first name Sky, last name Lee. As mentioned, I'm a social worker and a counselor, and I'm grateful to be here today. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge that I am sitting today in Vancouver on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I also acknowledge that others may be joining us from different territories today, and I welcome you. So Alana did a really good introduction of my experience. I just wanted to situate myself in it a little bit more so you understand where I'm coming from and where my experiences come from today. I'm in my 14th year of working with within one of the health authorities as a long-term care case manager and helping families navigate new diagnoses of Parkinson's or Parkinson's-like symptoms, MS, Alzheimer's, dementia, a lot of chronic illnesses, and working with clients and their families on connecting to services in the public system. And I also work privately supporting those families as well. About myself, a little bit about myself, so you have a better picture. I'm a mom to Scarlett, Jackson, and Paige, a wife to Ryan, I'm a sister, an auntie, a daughter, and a daughter-in-law. So we have the hour today, or 45 minutes to an hour to discuss learned optimism and hope. And it's my hope that you feel supported and heard and that I'm able to share a little bit of information with you as we move forward. I will pause about, a third of the way through for some questions after a big concept I talk about, and then I will take questions at the end. So here's our agenda for today. I've just done an introduction, and then I'll talk about learned optimism and hope. And then I'll talk about the stages of caregiving with hope and optimism kind of infused into those stages so it can be really practical for you. And I'll have a closing followed by some questions. Before I dive into the content, I just wanted to go over some terms that I'll be using today so that we're all on the same page. So first term, caregiver. So caregiver and care partner, I would say, are two terms that are mostly used in services and in the literature. It addresses that as a caregiver, you're giving your care, you're nurturing, and there's a care partner. It might be a bit of a dance between you and your loved one and a partnership. For the purposes of today's talk, I will be using the term caregiver. For the person in receipt of your care, some terms often used are loved one, family member, client, patient, the cared for. For the purposes of our conversation today, I'll be using the term loved one. However, I do acknowledge that there's not always love in these types of partnerships. You may be caring for someone who's hurt you in the past, or you may be a neighbor or a friend. So just acknowledging that, but I will still be using the term loved one today. It's what I'm used to saying and it rolls off my tongue. If you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my papers where you can only see this box of me, but I'm just looking at my papers here, my notes. So also like to go over some terms, not terms, but more the caregiver, and acknowledge that there might be many different caregivers out there. So you might be a spouse going above and beyond what you pictured in your marriage. You might be a close friend or a neighbor going above and beyond what you imagine your relationship would be. You could be a young adult, teen or early adult, maybe putting your own life on hold right now to care for someone. You may be a senior with your own healthcare issues and trying to navigate caring for a loved one and also caring for your own health. As part of the care partnership I mentioned, you might also be the loved one. I'm not sure who's in the audience today, if everybody is a caregiver or a loved one, but wanted to acknowledge that everybody is here. And if I've missed someone, I welcome you today, regardless of where you find yourself on this journey. So, learned optimism. Optimists are often thought of folks who think of the cup as half full, not half empty. A pessimist, the opposite of an optimist, would be somebody who looks at that cup as half empty. So in my research for this presentation and in my experience, I have noticed that people who practice optimism not only look at that cup as half full, but they look at that cup as half full when they're thirsty or when they need to water a plant. So using that water for something. As I wrote here on my slide, optimists are folks who look for ways to change a situation for the better and then take action to make those changes. So drinking that water or watering that plant, challenging negative thoughts. And the one that I've put here that's italicized, the basis of optimism does not lie in positive phrases or imagery, but in the way you think. And that is coined by a psychologist named Martin Seligman, who has a book called Learned Optimism. If you're interested, you can look up that. And it falls under a branch of psychology called positive psychology. And it's really about thinking about things positively and then altering your behaviors to put those positive thoughts into action. In healthcare, studies have showed that patients who practiced optimism often report a higher quality of life. And that's suggesting that their positive outlook in life actually buffers the negative impacts of their disease or diagnosis. So it's being approach focused versus avoidance or withdrawing. So an example would be if you're given a diagnosis or an illness, a virus, it's looking at ways to treat and looking at ways to help yourself versus denying the diagnosis or watching Netflix for months on end and not taking action. So that would be a pessimist in action. So I'm hopefully going to teach you just a little bit of optimism today. So hope. I think we all know what hope is. It's that feeling of trust, that feeling of desire. We hope that you learn something today. I hope this presentation goes really well and that you feel supported today. So it's wanting that certain pathway to happen. We have hope, at different stages in our lives. So looking at our scenario and looking at the way that you can maybe achieve that desired pathway, having a bit of openness, being very curious. For me, in my practice and in research, the difference between optimism and hope would be optimism is the practice of hope. So you've got the hope in your heart, you've got the hope in your mind, and optimism is actually putting it into action. So how do we do that? So this is what I've devised for our presentation today. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of my talk, and I will be referring back to this blue box as we move through our presentation. So don't feel like you have to memorize it. It's going to come back to you. So just wanted to break it down for you into 4 steps on how you can foster optimism and hope, some really concrete tools. So the first one is step 1. Look for areas where you can control or influence the situation. Where do you have an ability to learn or change, control or influence the situation or the event that you've been given? This can sometimes be you looking at yourself and what your strengths are, maybe even what your strengths are in your career, what they were in a hobby, and applying those strengths to a diagnosis. Are you a good advocate? Are you a good writer? Are you a good speaker? So looking for ways that you can make a difference. The second step is acceptance, and this is really important because it's the difference between optimists and pessimists. So optimists are very clear and they know the things that they cannot control. Pessimists will dwell and complain often about the things that they can't control. So for instance, a list of something that you can't control in a Parkinson's-like situation would be a diagnosis. That's something that you can't control. You can jot that down. I cannot control this. Other things you can't control might be broken relationships in your family that you can't go back to. Many other things. I'll leave that piece up to you, but that is being very clear on the things that you can't control. And that's important because we don't want to put our energy towards those things. The third step is taking action now. So that's putting that hope into practice. So start asking questions and doing research, making a plan to influence the things that you can control. So going back to step number 1 and looking at those things that you might be able to control and looking at how you can impact them. So some examples might be, well, just doing an online search. That is doing a bit of research, and then seeing if there's any emails that you can send or contacts that you can call, support groups you can sign up for, webinars like this that you have taken the time out today to join. So doing things sooner rather than later, and sooner within, a week or 2 or 3, but really not dwelling and not putting things off. And step 4, it's gratitude. So finding those moments of calm, joy, happiness. And the reason why this one is really important is because positive emotions calm your nervous system and they give you energy to be creative and to look for those areas of control and to look at how you can make a plan, take some steps towards changing a situation or just influencing it differently. As we go through our presentation, speaking of gratitude, so finding those, little moments of happiness or beauty even, I will be giving examples of where in my practice, clients and their family members have found gratitude even in the darkest times. So real case examples, of course, without using names or identifiers, just so you know that it is possible. So I'm going to pause right now. This is the meat and potatoes, as I said, of my presentation. And I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions about these steps. If they can certainly put them in the chat and Alana will let me know. And if not, I will move on.
Don't see any questions or anyone typing. Did you want to give it a minute or move on?
I think maybe it's just really clear. Hopefully it's clear enough. Okay, I will move on. That was my pause. So this is the stages of caregiving. This is the texture of the presentation. So stages of caregiving. I wanted to refer to the scale that I have there, and the scale on the top is the loved one's functionality, their ability to function. And the one on the bottom is the caregiver. So as a loved one's functionality lessens, the demands on the caregiver become heavier. So in the literature, the stages of caregiving, I'm just going to look at my notes here. Yeah, the literature shows 3 to 5 stages of caregiving, sometimes with different names for each stages, depending on who you read. Some of the other names might be dependence, interdependence, complex, palliative. For our time today, I have just broken it down into 4 stages with very easy names: basic, beginning, intermediate, advanced, and end of life. And well, Len, I did see something come up in the chat. Is that a question that I should take or continue on?
Sure, there is a question that just came up. A lot of people spend a lot of time trying to change their partner's mood, exercise, or lack thereof, and get frustrated. Can you speak to that?
I can. I'm wondering if...
Did you want to say that till the end?
Yeah, because I might actually end up answering that throughout, but that is a good question. And I'll jot that down to come back. So how to influence changing mood and activity. Okay, thank you for whoever submitted that. So the stages of caregiving: basic, intermediate, advanced, and end of life. So the first stage, so this is from my experience, this is stages of caregiving throughout all chronic illnesses: Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, MS, ALS. They all have these very similar trajectory and characteristics for the caregiver. So the beginning stage here, your loved one, and I've put the arms around people because you're often still walking alongside your loved one, just kind of holding each other up a little bit. So your loved one is still mobile. It's the early onset of symptoms. They're still quite dependent. As a caregiver, you might notice that a little bit more help is needed around the house, small tasks here and there, maybe a bit of shopping, maybe a little appointment here or there. So it's 1 to 10 hours, and these numbers are, very rough, but this is about what the research shows: 1 to 10 hours of caregiving support a week. As a caregiver, you might notice your identity shifting a bit. So you're noticing some changes here for sure. And I will say that these stages of caregiving aren't black and white. They're not, one day I'm in number 1 and then the next day I'm in number 2. You might notice that, I did a lot of shopping this week and I did a lot of cooking yesterday, and we have about 3 medical appointments next month and I'm really tired. Maybe I'm moving on to the next stage, or somebody had a fall and now there's a lot of appointments and equipment that needs to be put in, and you might kind of jump to another stage. So they're very fluid stages, and just noting that you might still be in between at times. So beginning stage. So this is that blue box I told you would come back to you. How can you foster optimism and hope within the beginning stage? So that first step, looking for areas of control, change, or influencing. So things that you still might be able to impact or change would be symptom management, self-care strategies for you as a caregiver, your emotions, and communicating with your loved one. When I say that, I mean that your loved one is still able to understand, you're able to talk, you're able to have conversations. Things that you can't control is the diagnosis or illness. And if there are other things, I'm sure you can think of them right now. So action, what kind of things can you do at the beginning stages that can bring some optimism and hope for you on this caregiving journey? So talking to your doctor, medical team, if you've been referred to neurology or you've been referred to psychiatry, whatever it is, talking to them and asking questions, making those appointments, finding a support group. I believe the Parkinson Society has support groups. If not, I know of other caregiver support groups out there. And making an appointment and going to them. So that's the action now. And talking with your loved one, talking about planning ahead, how they might want things to look. So gratitude. So these are things that clients and their family members have told me. So they have time together. They know that there's still a lot of time in their journey. They're at the beginning stages. They have time to research. And a lot of the time, people are happy for a diagnosis. They've been having symptoms for sometimes many years, and they finally have a diagnosis. And that is something to be thankful for at times. So this next stage, the intermediate. And I put this picture here is for the holding hands is because it is more hands-on. So this is where you as a caregiver are going to be helping quite a bit more with things like meals, not just the cooking, but the planning and the shopping, housekeeping, laundry, finances maybe. Your loved one, you may notice mobility decline, different motor skills changing, balance might be changing. So you might be looking into different mobility aids at this point. You'll be tired, you might be tired, and your loved one might be tired as well. In terms of your loved one, they may have reduced attention, they may have reduced memory, starting to kind of see a bit of a decline, a bit of changes there in how they used to function. Your loved one may not be themselves. So this is 10 to 20 hours a week, so quite a bit more. In my experience, the stage can be very difficult for caregivers because you're out of that beginning stage and now you're in it. And that previous life you had of, travel maybe, or work, or your children are beginning to either fade away or it's becoming a bit of a memory more than something that's in the present. So there's that feeling of loss that can happen at this time. And your identity is really shifting as a caregiver, and it can be very, very challenging. As any transition we do in life, when you're transitioning into another role of, mother or wife or teacher or whatever it is, those transitions into a new identity can be challenging. So, fostering some hope and optimism in this second stage, intermediate stage. So looking for areas of change, influence, or control. This is where you can have a conversation with your loved one and talk about future medical plans. How do they want to live out their years? Are there any medications or treatments that they absolutely don't want? That is an area that you can control and you can write down and you can plan around that. The finances of your loved one, as I mentioned, some memory and cognition changes might be happening, or ability to even do taxes, things like that. So looking at, okay, this is something I can control. Do we need to get a power of attorney? Do we need to assign a family member as managing finances? So knowing that it isn't just a loss of that person managing finances, you can make those changes to assign maybe someone else. Accessibility of your home or work. So perhaps we need to look at getting some mobility aids, like I mentioned, walker, cane, whatnot. Some clients I know at this stage have put in that kind of stair elevator. I can't remember the name of it, but they like the electronic stair slide thing that goes up and down, so folks can still stay in their own home and just be able still to go up and down stairs. Some people have put ramps in. Making changes around your house, so that is something that you can impact. Symptom management, talking to the doctor about upping a med or decreasing a med to try and manage your symptoms or side effects of those medications. Medication administration might be something that's frustrating to open up a bunch of bottles every morning and every night and maybe at lunchtime. So you can change that. You can maybe ask your pharmacist to blister pack your meds, so getting them put in one of those kind of paper envelope things where you can punch out medications, or changing the lids to tip off lids rather than screwing if your fine motor skills or your loved one's fine motor skills are beginning to decline. So just small little areas of change. Looking for areas that you can't control. So the decline in the function is a trajectory of many illnesses at this stage, and it's not something you can control. Often at this point, I have family members telling me about other family members who aren't helping enough, who are not pulling their weight is often a phrase I hear. This might be something that you need to come to terms with, or knowing that you can't change, rather than dwelling or trying to get that loved one or that family member to assist. It might be something you need to accept that they're not going to help out, so that you can find help somewhere else if you need to. So action now. How can we make a little bit of changes in this stage? In terms of that accessibility of home or work, that would be asking for a home safety assessment with an occupational therapist. That can be done privately or publicly through your health authority. You can have somebody come in and assess your house for safety and make suggestions on what changes might need to be made to make it safer. Future planning paperwork. So this is putting it into action. So those medical decisions that might need to be made, writing them down, having some advanced care directives with your doctor, having everything kind of in order, just getting it done, getting things signed, making the appointments with lawyers or whatever notaries, whatever need to be made. Looking into hiring some outside help. It's going to be getting challenging moving on to the next stage. So this is the time where you look into hiring maybe some home care, or calling your health authority and seeing what's out there in the public system. When can someone come in? What can they come in for? That's like a home care worker giving you a bit of help. Or maybe it's just a housekeeper coming in and doing some cleaning a couple of times a month. But actually doing it and looking and emailing and calling and making those connections. And as I mentioned, also getting your medications blister pack. This has saved many families in my experience. So gratitude at this stage. Some clients and family members have told me, well, we haven't had any falls yet or in a long time. This is a good thing. The medications are finally working. My loved one has gotten used to them, or the side effects have calmed down a little bit and they're working. Or we got outside today, got some fresh air. Just small things, but knowing that there are moments that you can find some happiness or joy. So the advanced stage of caregiving. I put this picture here of this lovely gentleman wearing maybe 10 or 15 hats. So caregivers at this time in my role and in my experience are wearing many hats. They are A caregiver, they are a wife, a husband, a dad, a mom, an employee, a grandparent, an aunt. But that caregiving role is almost the heaviest one right on top. So in addition to the help that your loved one needed in the other two stages, kind of piling on a bit more help here, they may need more help with those more intimate and heavier tasks, such as dressing, feeding, toileting, possibly overnight care, which could be turning somebody or helping them in and out of bed to go to the washroom, swallowing, sometimes feeding. I don't think I did put feeding on there, and personal care. So that's having a shower, a bath, that kind of thing. Your loved one may have some reduced concentration or memory, so maybe getting a bit harder to have fruitful conversations with them, or not, but this is something that I see at this stage. This is a heavy stage in terms of medical appointments, hospital visits. There could be many falls at this stage, many acute medical changes in the body happening. UTIs or something I often see, illnesses, or UTI is a urinary tract infection, so bladder infections. Yeah, just a lot of doctor's appointments at this stage or hospital visits. So 20 to 40 hours a week, that's a lot. That's a lot of hours at this stage. And at this time, I would say many of the families I work with have hired help coming in. So some home care coming in once a day to help with maybe a shower or a bath or medication administration. If they don't have some hired help, they usually have other family members coming in and maybe doing a bit of shifts to care for their loved one. This is sometimes a time when families start to think about the possibility of a long-term care placement or having a live-in caregiver, somebody who's spending a lot of time with them during the day and the night. So during this heavy stage of caregiving, what are some areas here? And you can think of some as well that you might be able to influence and change. So if you do have home care in, you might be able to control the schedule and say, yes, I would like you to come in at 8, not 11, or come in the morning, not at night. So that's a small change, but it is giving you still some control in the situation. You can look for respite or relief options. This is the time when all of those family and friends who have said, let me know if you need anything. This is the time when you can alter your situation and call in some help. Maybe scheduling someone to come every Sunday to give you a break, or looking into what respite options are. Respite is when somebody gives you a break. You can have that paid for, or you can have that during friends and family. You can also control friends and family coming over just for social visits to see your loved one. How often? Are they bringing food maybe for you? Are they picking up a couple things on the way? So really tapping into any resources that you have. Things you can't control is this decline in function that is happening. You may be on a pretty big medication regime, and that might not be something that you can control at this point. It just is what it is. And you might not be able to control those number of appointments, doctor's appointments. But what I would say is the one thing COVID has given us clearly right now is the ability to have virtual appointments with doctors. And I have seen that take an enormous pressure off of caregivers now that they're able to not get their loved one in and out of a car to go see a doctor, that they can a lot of times do those appointments virtually or on the phone. So the action now is scheduling those respite breaks, scheduling somebody to come in and give you a break, scheduling your home care. In Vancouver, there's a family respite center where you can drop your loved one off for, overnight or a weekend or a week, and they have very, very skilled clinicians there and care aides to care for your loved one if you need a break. So scheduling it and calling and figuring out the system and how to get in there. seeking counseling or support groups is a great way to manage those feelings of loss, grief, sadness, anger, frustration that comes with all of these stages. And I would say that those are things that really should not be ignored. And if there is anyone you can talk to, that those feelings do need to be processed. If they're not, they often can lead to, for you as a caregiver, to depression or really your mental state not being well, and that in turn impacts your ability to caregive. So really having someone that you can process those with. Social workers are great for that. I'll put my little plug in for any social workers on your team. Those are typically the folks you can reach out to for that kind of support. So calling your local health authority and asking, what are my options for long-term care? Like, this might be a road that you have had a conversation with your loved one and you want to go down. So now's the time to be calling and asking for a case manager or somebody to come in and do an assessment to figure out eligibility for long-term or what that process is, depending on where you live. Some gratitude, some happiness, some small moments. We had a good night, so we didn't have to wake up many times last night. The medications are finally reducing the pain of my loved one, or after he takes his morning meds, it takes about 30 minutes, but then he's not in pain anymore. He's able to relax for a few hours. We saw and smelled the blossoms today. So our final stage here, end of life. So this is, intense caregiving that's providing comfort care to our loved ones at the end stages of their disease or diagnosis. I'd say in this stage, it's very rare that I see a family that doesn't have some kind of medical team or nurse involved quite heavily at this stage. So in saying that, your loved one might be in hospice, which is where someone goes during the final stages of their life, long-term care, hospital, or at home. They may have quite a few acute medical treatments, so catheters put in, an IV perhaps, or a lot of medications to relieve pain quite frequently throughout the day. So this is a lot of caregiving. So this is at a stage usually when your loved one can't be left alone, and that's why I say that there's usually a medical team involved, like in a hospital or hospice or something, and therefore it is 40 plus hours a week. So you're there, and it's very rare that I see a family that's doing all of this on their own. At this stage, I would say that caregivers are really good at that acceptance part of optimism. They've accepted that this is the end for them and their loved one, and they're really making the best of that those last few days. The stress and the anxiety of the early onset of the diagnosis has waned, and it can be a really beautiful time for families. So fostering optimism and hope at the end stage. So areas that you can have control over is keeping your loved one comfortable. What was their favorite blanket that, an old aunt may have crocheted or knitted down the line? So bringing that blanket in and covering up your loved one. Giving them comfortable clothes, medications that are keeping them comfortable, any foods that they are allowed to eat, bringing those in and creating a calming environment for them if that's what they want, right? Those end of life or medical decisions that we talked about in stage 2, now is the time to enact them. So you're showing that optimism that you had at the beginning is now playing out. So the acceptance part that I was talking about, that caregivers have come to terms with, the mortality of their loved one and our mortality as humankind, that there is an end point, and that's okay. That is okay at this stage. What do we do? Gather family around if that's what your loved one has expressed that they want around at this time. creating meaningful moments with each other during these last few days together. Could be, going through photo books, going through your phone where you have a whole bunch of photos and videos, bringing in grandchildren, things like that. Calling the home hospice palliative care through your local health authority. So if you were doing this stage at home, the health authority does provide this whole branch of healthcare called home hospice and palliative care, and they will provide nurses for you to come in during those last stages, for a set amount of hours are allowed, and that's paid for through your taxes. So just to let you know, if you are in this stage, to call your local health authority and ask about what their home hospice team can offer you. So gratitude, and this one always gets me choked up, but it was with a daughter and her mom at the end stages of an illness. I never thought I'd have that level of closeness with my mother, but in her final days, we shared a bond, and for that, I'm grateful. So in closing, I wanted to give a little takeaway. So my first takeaway is that blue box. If you want to take a screenshot or jot down notes, that might be something that can help you in your journey. And this little takeaway here is something that I always talk to my caregivers about. And it's called the 4 C's, the 4 C's of caregiving. And I've infused optimism into it. So you didn't cause it. You can't control it. That's your acceptance stage there, your acceptance part. You can't cure it, so a bit more of acceptance, but you can cope. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it, but you can cope. And you can cope by using the tips, some of the information that I've given you today. So that concludes my presentation. I can certainly take some questions. I can get back to that question that was asked before if I didn't answer it. And I hope that I provided you with some hope and optimism as you navigate this journey. I've put my email up here. If you have any questions, you can certainly email Alana, or you can email myself, and I'll do my best to answer them. So Alana, I'll just stop sharing my screen, and then I will look at the chat to see if there's any. Is that okay?
Yeah. I don't see any questions right now, but the other one is still up.
Okay. So the question from Catherine, a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to change their person's mood, exercise, or lack thereof, and get frustrated. Can you speak to that? I'll do my best to speak to it. So I would look at mood, exercise, or lack thereof as perhaps being one of those things that you may not be able to change, that might be part of the acceptance. In terms of the mood, I don't know what kind of medications that your loved one might be on. Sometimes an impact of medication or a side effect of medications can be a lowered mood. So you may talk to GP or talk to the medical team about that. It could be a side effect of the medication. Exercise, it might be something you can't change. If you are very frustrated and really want your loved one to get some exercise, you can perhaps get in touch with your health authority and see if there's a physio that can come out and suggest some exercises that might be more comfortable for your loved one. Maybe on your medical team there already is a physiotherapist. It may be having home care do the exercises with your loved one rather than you, just to kind of take you out of the picture. And getting frustrated out of it, that is a piece of caregiving, and frustration is a sign of early burnout. So being aware that you're getting frustrated and knowing that this might be something I can't change, and looking for other areas that you might be able to change. So from Roseanne, will you please show the blue box again? Thank you for a most interesting session. I Roseanne, if I can share it at the end, because if I share it now, I can't see any other questions that come up, but I will put it back up for sure, if that's okay. And Catherine again, can you speak to the power of meditation as offering enhancing? Yes, absolutely. Oh, I can speak for hours about meditation. So can you speak to meditation as offering enhancing calmness and acceptance in the caregiver as well as your loved one? So I will speak to the caregiver piece. Meditation is one of those things that can impact, it takes you out of fight or flight. So when you're caregiving, you are often in a fight or flight mode. And by fight or flight, I mean, you're ready for battle, you're ready to, make a change, you're ready to support your loved one, and your nerves and all the connections in your nervous system are very high. So when you meditate, you actually reverse that stress response. So it gives your body some time to calm down, and it gets oxygen back into your body. So you're able to digest, you're able to breathe, you're able to get the benefits of the food that you've digested, and therefore you'll be getting some energy. You're able to look at your thoughts and how fast they're going through your head, and possibly giving them a moment to slow down. There are many meditation apps out there. I mean, if you just Google like top 15 apps of 2022, many will come up. Some of them are free. A lot of them have a free trial period. On YouTube, if you Google guided meditation, there are free guided meditations that can take you through this. And that would be part of your self-care. I would start that as soon as you can, just to give yourself 5 minutes of being out of a fight or flight response, giving your body a moment. I don't see another questions. Oh. So from Priscilla, can you speak to your comment of the person you are caring for is not someone you love due to immense hurt, was going to leave a relationship, however, own mental health got in the way, and then when getting better, he got sick, and now I can't leave until I meet my commitment of good care, until I can get him placed. Not sure when that will be. How would you counsel somebody in that situation? So that's a big one. And so that would be a few sessions, a few sessions to talk about that. But just off the top of my head, Priscilla, I would work to acknowledge the hurt that's happened, any other feelings that are under there, guilt, resentment, whatnot, and acknowledging that those are still there. And it's okay to have those feelings. And then I would look at values and what you as a person and as a caregiver to everybody out there, what are your values? Do you value integrity? Do you value honesty? Do you value the rights of seniors, dignity, self-worth? And looking at those values and knowing that you are working perhaps not from a place of love, but from a place of your values as a human, and that is okay to continue caring, even though you may not be in love or love the person or have resentment or anger towards them. Certainly email me more if you have questions about that, Priscilla. I hope I answered your question. I will put that slide back up again for Rosemary. Oh, sorry. There we go. Alana, if any questions come up while this is up, if you could kindly read them out to me.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions about that one? Oh,
Just a comment, a thank you
okay.
again. Well, I shouldn't say just. Comments are important.
Oh, I can see the questions. I put them up. Oh, dear. If Rosemary is still there, let me know if if this is what you were looking for.
Another comment, this was an awesome and informative session. So grateful.
You're welcome. I'm so honored to be asked to present and share my passion for caregiving.
Can you speak to the power of journaling and recognizing your negative feelings and working through them?
So journaling is like writing a letter to yourself that you never put in the mail. And I mean, I haven't done any research on the power of journaling. I just know from personal experience and from experience of other clients who have journaled. When you journal and you write down your negative emotions, so today I'm really frustrated because I had to repeat myself 10 times to my loved one, and it's so frustrating. I shouldn't feel frustrated because of XYZ, or I can't stand where I am, XYZ, and you just keep writing and writing and writing. And you end up working through your negative emotions without the guilt of having to say it to your loved one, or your family, or whoever, your sister, brother, whoever else is kind of in your social circle, your social unit. And as you're writing them out, you're connecting your brain with your feelings and your hands. So actually writing out the emotions and writing out your thoughts, you're not only getting them out on paper, but you're engaging many, many of your senses. And for many folks, that can be a sense of relief. So that feeling of people having that weight lifted off their shoulders can often happen through journaling, because you've gotten it out, you've said what you needed to say, and you haven't hurt anyone's feelings while doing it. It also taps into memories that you may not have known were there. If you just start writing about another time you were frustrated, or another time you were upset or hurt, and kind of, oh, I didn't realize that I'd been hurt 5 times in the past by this person or someone else, and things slowly start to make sense. It is something that I suggest to every single client I have. If they have the time, and if they're a journaling type of person, to go for it. I also suggest to just grab paper. You don't have to buy a fancy journal from Indigo. Just get some old school foolscap and a pencil, a nice smooth pencil, and just start writing. Number and date your pages, and there you go. You're writing a letter to yourself. Catherine, I hope that answered your question.
Sky, I have a question. So, I mean, we have various personality types out there. And what advice would you have for someone who perhaps is naturally more pessimistic, sees the glass as half empty, and they say to you, well, yes, I hear what you're saying, but it's easier said than done. Like, what advice would you have for that person?
For that person, I mean, I get those clients all the time. So for that person, it is a matter of breaking things down into, so my presentation is a big presentation. It looks great, but when you actually get down to the nitty and gritty, can those things be done? And I would argue that they can, that there are always, always, always things you can change, things you can influence, conversations that you can have. And it would be a matter of breaking it down to Where do you feel as a pessimist or somebody who's not naturally optimistic? Where do you feel that you can't make a change? Okay, writing them all down and then actually going through them with a counselor, a social worker, the doctor, your loved one, a family member, perhaps with somebody else to see if if you could have somebody else's point of view in going through those things and seeing where there might be able to be a little bit of wiggle room. But it really is, Alana, about talking it through. Where do you think you can't change anything? And finding those ways that you actually might be able to. It is a process of breaking it down.
Great, thank you.
So Rosemary, because of many things, we were already in burnout when we got the diagnosis. Really, really, really hard to add one more thing, let alone a Parkinson's diagnosis and reality for the future. I think that's a comment versus a question, and I do acknowledge that burnout is a very, very, very big part of caregiving, and it's often a time when outside help is brought in. But Rosemary, good for recognizing the burnout.
And there was another comment, the quality of your presentation has been very beneficial and appreciated.
Thank you. I can see the comments now. Elena, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much. Anything else burning for anyone? Alana, is it okay if I put my email in the chat, or do you want to field any other for future questions that come in?
Oh no, go for it. Yeah, you can put your email in the chat if you like. And we have a couple of more minutes. So if you have any other questions or comments, please do put them in the chat box. And I guess if they come to you later, you have Sky's email. She's kindly sharing that with us. So I think perhaps we can wrap it up then. Are you okay with that, or did you want to wait a couple more minutes?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, we're good to wrap up. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
I want to thank you, Sky. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, very helpful and very informative. And somebody here is asking, how do I get the recorded version? So it will be posted on our website, but if you'd like to email me, I can send you the link. It usually takes us a couple of days or a few days to process the recording and then post it. So again, thank you so much, Sky. Really appreciate all of that informative information and taking the time to join us today. And thank you all for attending and for all of your great questions and comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.